You welcome everybody to this very exciting moment. It's really been nice being with you, talking with you for quite a while. And I hope you've been enjoying this moment. And I hope you are telling your friends, telling your contacts about this channel, because it's going to be something we hope it goes beyond our conventional ways of taking literature, theories, and all that. If you've been on this channel for quite a while, you observe that we've been taking our models, so to speak, from one particular genre of literature or idea of literature and discuss to the other. Okay? But this moment, we want to look at a very fundamental aspect of literature today, which has to do with creative writing. We're going to touch all others as we go on, still revisit theory, come to aspects of discourse, and so on and so forth. But since creative writing seems to be today a very functional aspect of how literature is understood, I think we need to engage that idea and exactly that practice of creative writing. So for some time now, we'll be engaging the idea, the art, and the science of creative writing. You might be surprised that creative writing could be a science. Yes, why not? Because, for example, if we think about the idea of plots and then plot structure, you are talking about science. You are engaging what you might call a form of engineering that has to do with structures, that has to do with models and models of delivery. So for this moment, we are going to be discussing creative writing. Now, what is creative writing? Let's first talk about the idea of literature. Literature has been problematized in a very number of ways, especially as it changes in the context of time and audience and then of setting, so that we can talk about oral literature, performance literature, written literature, and nowadays, I can tell you, we can talk about digital literature, where literature has now arrived at a number of publics that, engage it along several dimensions, along several kinds of terrains, that make it very, very functional to human beings. Now, when we talk about creative writing, what are we really doing? We are dealing with a form of expression, a form of performance that necessarily calls attention to the way in which its message is delivered. It has that kernel of what we can call imaginativeness in it. The imaginativeness, let's clarify this, is not necessarily in the aspect of its fictionality. That is, you are portraying a particular scenario which never really existed or which doesn't exist, and then you are making it to seem as if it is actually there, as if it is real. Yes, that is fiction, but that doesn't necessarily arrive at what we mean by creativity or imagination. Most times when people talk about prose, they align it necessarily to fiction. Well, we can't talk about prose as a fictional aspect of delivery, definitely, which is consistent with, a genre like the novel, and definitely subgenres within the narrative scale, like the short story, the novelette, novella, and then you might be talking about something more robust, expanding into several pages, like what is called a blockbuster. When you are arriving at something from 500 pages or so, or right up that is imaginative, you have arrived at, the shores of the blockbuster. But then, when we talk about creative writing, what matters to us is the imaginativeness of the deployment of language, the way in which language is made to be rhetorical, to arrest an immediate response and attention, not even that, the entertainment value of the audience, in a way in which language itself does something that is very magnetizing and that makes you to see a number of worlds, a number of events, a number of territories, a number of histories that you never contemplated. Through creative writing, we can arrive at ideas that can really change the world. For example, we've been told by some research that the advent of man going to the moon was preceded by a kind of science fiction, that was about 100 years earlier than man going to the moon in the late 1960s. In other words, people at that time, some creative writers at that time, had been imagining man traveling beyond their particular environment, beyond their own ecology, that makes them to look at things very, very differently and very, very interestingly. That is, man going to a kind of orbit that transgresses the experiences of the environment. And therefore, people began to paint the possibility of man going to the moon. But then, with time, science, we can say, has a lot to do with ideas, and ideas in themselves are imaginations. With the advent of science fiction, particular scientific models began to imagine the possibilities of man actually going beyond gravity and surging into space. And a very terse way of talking about the history tells us that that was the moment that the idea of man traveling to the moon came up. And that actually actualized in the late 1960s. Remember the Sputnik that the Russians took to space, and how, man began to discover an extraterrestrial materiality of the possibility of life, and which was really dramatized. Well, where we are going to is that the imagination preceded science. And then when we are talking about creative writing, let's understand that we are engaged in two forms of deliveries. One, we are involved in the imaginative, and by extension, we are going to expand our mental horizons beyond what we have been used to, okay? But then into what we are been familiar with. For example, there is no way you are talking about any form of story that doesn't have an alignment with the human faculty, even if it's strange. Why do fairy tales make so much impact on man? Because you have characterization, you have a particular narrative that is going on, you have cause and effect matters, and then you have issues like suspense, surprise, the sudden, the shocking, and so on and so forth, that keep titillating the audience and keeps arresting, the attention of the viewers. So we have that imaginative skill within creative writing. And definitely we have the scientific. You are getting into the science of writing the moment you have a plot and you have a structure. The moment you arrange a story from one point to the other within the lineage of sequentiality, of correspondence, of progression, you are within science. So creative writing accommodates the imaginative and the scientific. Now, how do we get into creative writing? Let's first of all talk about what we can call the genres of creative writing. Well, in very conventional terms that we have inherited right from the new classical period up till now, we famously talk about three genres of creative writing. We talk about poetry, we talk about drama, and then we talk about prose fiction. And as time went on, as we have tried to explore within this channel, we found out that there seemed to be a kind of the hegemony of writing in creative writing, in literature. So that if you talk about literature, what immediately comes to the mind of anybody is something written. Okay, that has its timing, it has its discourse, it has what we can call its moment, which has endured up till now, especially when you look at how the Enlightenment, okay, in Europe had a lot to do with ideas of modernity, and how that modernity hoped to move man, so to speak, away from some traditional sphere of living to some avant-gardist realms of inventions, of arrivals, of newness, and so on and so forth. So writing became a particular skill of defining, civilizational attainments of man, and also it became a vehicle to suspect a kind of stagnancy and then break it out in the idea of civilization and motion. But now, if we were to talk about writing and creativity, I dare tell you that we have moved beyond where we have to write on the paper, and we have even moved beyond the fixity, the pages. We have gone into digitality, and then we are also memorializing the aura within the scope of where writing comes up. Check the internet, for example, when you are looking at what you might call cyber literature. In cyber literature, what matters mostly is a form of hypertextuality. When we are talking about the text of the digital, we come in contact with multimodalities. We come in contact with the immediacies of changes, that can happen within a particular forum of communication. You can be seeing the graphic alongside with the written, and also the spoken can be going on. Then the genres of creativity, of literature, have really expanded into several ways in which the rigidity of scholarship, of authorship, as we used to understand it in our conventional ways, have been eroded. For example, we have the blog online. We can talk about the Twitter. So many lines that come up on Twitter can be very dramatic. That's why people keep running into the tweets, But then, when we talk about the Twitter, something must be motivating people to want to read the next thing that is coming up. It is the shock, it is the surprise, it is the way language is, arranged to get attention, and definitely you are talking about creative writing there. When you also get into some other forms of adventures online, for example, on Facebook, we have a number of micro narratives that are happening online. There are certain forms of idyllic, novelistic kind of stories that come up online. They are not in chapters, but they are put in the plots, the structures of chapterization. They come like text messages, so to speak, because the pages are not long. The idea is to arrest attention and to keep a kind of motion, within the storyline. When that is the case, you discover that what the writer is trying to achieve there is to get a continuum of audience fixity to the storyline. And then, the pages are so much arranged that they don't go for long. The next thing you are going to read might not go beyond about 5 lines, and then it switches, and you might see some pictures, and then you go on and so on and so forth. So that what we are trying to say is that writing and literature have gone beyond the 3 parameter definitions of what we call literature, of being in some prose fiction or prose narrative, as they were called, but definitely in writing, and then drama, and then poetry. But then, let's talk about a number of genres that we can find out in creative writing before we begin to delve into the nitty-gritties of creative writing. I've talked about the genre of, poetry, and then we have prose, we have drama. We can talk about the digital genres of blogging. We can talk about those that happen within Twitter. Somebody ingeniously described the literature of Twitter as twin literature. Very interesting terminology. We can talk about things that happen even within Instagram. We can even talk about graphic literature. And in that graphic literature, the text is more of a pictorial thing than a written thing. For example, when we talk about cartoons like the manga of the Japanese, or there are some coming within Africa today that illustrate a number of breakages from regular thematics of the day and also the aesthetics of known narratives, to the extent that what you often see is the collapse of the digital in form of a kind of film structuration and delivery into something prosaic and at the same time something dramatic. And then definitely something very visual. I was telling one of my children just some hours back, he was watching a particular cartoon on the TV. I could see the Incredible Hulk. I could see Spider-Man and so many other that I was reading when I was a boy, like in cartoons, that we bought, necessarily in writing. But now I was very impressed to see that, wow, this is Hulk. I could see Hulk becoming very animate, holding things. I could see Spider-Man. I could see people like Superman. And I was asking him if there is a continuum between what we are watching in our days and his time now. I said, do you know Captain America? He said, yes. And he was telling me some others. He knows Tarzan. And Tarzan, I had known Tarzan when I was a very, very young boy. But the point is the change of mode. The modality of literature has changed to a very great extent that we cannot rely on what was given to us at a very historical time of modernity and still restrict literature within that form. No, time changes, humanity changes, imaginative skills change, and so many other things like that. So we can say that we have several kinds of genres of creative writing. I dare tell us that your content creation for markets, like companies, what you write for a particular blog, a particular company, a particular advertising establishment, and so many other things like that, is a form of creative writing. For example, have you wondered how billboards can be very arresting, very, very compelling? Yes, it is a collapse of a number of imaginative devices. First of all, you are seeing something on your billboard, digital billboard, coming to you like a cinema. And then you see this product coming up in its materiality. And then a very catchy phrase that lingers within the mind. That phrase is not something you can just write at the spur of the moment, even though the spur of the moment informs it. It is something that is orchestrated in such manner that it calls immediate attention of the viewer. And then that becomes another form of particular writing. For example, we can be talking about a beverage, for example, and somebody says, take this and get suspended into your future. Or somebody says, a bite is an adventure with a future. Or somebody says something that drink this and be in space. Or somebody tells you on a particular advert, go beyond, somebody is saying, go beyond Microsoft. Get it into your mind. And you begin to wonder, this association is with a particular object that is on advertisement. So that creative writing is not just something at the end of the day that belongs to certain forms of writers, that must be in literature, that must be in the art, that must be within a department called English or within the Faculty of Humanities and all that. No. Now, creative writing is now taking its place as a functional human exercise that we must continually get involved with. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being within the opening of the exciting series we're starting on creative writing. When we meet again, we are going right into the very adventures of what we have just started today. Thank you very much.